There was the sound of thunder in the sky, and it started to rain. Light rose from the absolute throne to touch the sky. Thick rain clouds swirled around this light. It was a sign of the fifth scenario, the Great Hell. The immediate Dokja opened his mouth amidst the rain.
What did you just say?
The throne. I won't accept it.
I don't know why you're doing such a thing. Don't you think it'll benefit you to gain more coins at this time? Didn't you just use a lot of coins? You should be rewarded. Even with the power of the absolute throne, the Soul Dome will never survive the fifth scenario.
The people in Guahamon screamed at me once they heard the Dokja's words.
What are you thinking? Don't be stupid! Sit down quickly!
Damn, I'll sit! The Dokja kept talking as if it was going his own way.
That throne can give you whatever you want. Just sitting on the throne will build up your narrative, and the sponsor you contracted will rise. Don't you know what this means?
In fact, I could hear the outcry of the constellations in my ears. The constellation, Adventurer who stands up an egg, wants to be your sponsor. The constellation, So Il Pil wants to be your sponsor. How much coins have been sponsored? The enemy Dokja continued to speak in a cold voice.
I will warn you in advance. I'm not like those low-level Dokjabis. Don't think that flimsy tricks will work on me.
I looked at the Absolute Throne. As the Dokja said, the fifth scenario would be difficult to clear without the Absolute Throne. However, I knew what the Dokja wasn't saying. If I used this Absolute Throne once, I'd never be able to reach the end of the scenarios. In the original work, Yu Jungkook only noticed this at the 14th regression. The Absolute Throne was such an item.
Why aren't you becoming king?
An agitated person appeared among the crowd. The man breathed out and spat at me like I insulted him. I turned towards the man. That's what I want to ask. Why do you want me to become king? What? What will you do if I kill you after I become king? The lips of the man stiffened for a moment. I continued watching the people around us. All of you the same. Have you forgotten? We originally didn't live in a kingdom. Why are you acting like citizens of a kingdom? Why didn't I want to be a king? It was simple. I don't want to be the king of ugly humans like you. I looked up at the sky while speaking. In addition, I don't want ugly constellations like you to be my sponsor. Then I looked at the throne. Thus, I'll never sit on the absolute throne. But I pulled out my blade. I won't allow other people to sit on the throne. Once someone sat down, it meant no one else could sit on it.
You should be careful. I'm not that patient.
I continued to speak as I stared at the Dokja. How long will you continue to be drawn helplessly into the Dokja scenarios? Does anyone know what it means to sit on the absolute throne? I knew how much the people who were once obedient would pay to leave disobedience. The constellation of the Korean Peninsula is the same for you. I know not all constellations are the same. Some constellations are low and some are high. There was an invisible rank among constellations. Just as some constellations watched the incarnations, other constellations watched the other constellations. To be precise, the low constellations were being watched. But is it enough now? How long will you turn the land into a playground for unhappy guests? The constellation, one out of Maitreya, is immersed. Working to build up a history to become a constellation, and then building up narratives to become a narrative-grid constellations? Then what? The higher the sky, the brighter the star? How long will you continue using the descendants of this land for your own sake? The constellation, Lady of the Brocade Sleep, is silent.
I can't stand any longer.
A system message arrived at the same time. A new subscenario has arrived. Subscenario. Forced secession. Category. Sub. Difficulty. B. Clear conditions. Suppress the incarnation, Kim Dokja, who doesn't want to sit on the throne, and place him on the throne. Time limit. 30 minutes. Compensation. 6,000 coins. Failure. None. I thought it would turn out like this. The people who'd been shaken by my words were now approaching. In the end, it was just like the Dokja said. The people present and me as well. No matter what I said, they would sell their conscience for a few coins. Of course, this didn't apply to everyone. Pass me if you can. A woman appeared in front of me. People faltered or growled out words. It was Jung Hee-won.
No matter what the world is like, there's something you shouldn't forget.
Yusung suddenly approached. Lee Gillian was standing behind me with a hammer like he had been waiting. Jung-mi and Lee Sung-kook also came forward. Sometimes, representativeness is more like a protagonist than Yu Jung-ok. Yu Jung-ok isn't this crazy. They're also surprising people.
Just this once, I will help you.
Your words are convincing. They were King of Beauty, Min Ji-won, and Maitreya King, Cha Sung-kyung. I didn't know which of my words had moved their hearts. However, it was clear that something had changed. Even so, it was only a handful.
You're playing well. What are all you doing? Put him down now!
People started running towards the throne. Jung Hee-won pushed the people around me and asked,
Dokja-shi, do you have an idea?
Yes.
What should we do?
Buy me some time. I have to destroy this throne. The length of the new scenario was contained in this throne. I pulled out a sword, causing someone to cry out, The 4-yin demonic beheading sword! The S-grade 4-yin demonic beheading sword. However, it was an item that could be changed into a star relic if certain conditions were satisfied. It was because the 4-yin demonic beheading sword was an item made with the soul of a constellation. Ganpangui's special option, Echo of the Stars, has been activated. Echo of the Stars allows you to ask for the help of a constellation. I'll call a constellation. The great constellations hear your voice flowing through the stars. I called out the constellations like I had memorized the spell. I want the first star, the Big Dipper, the Greedy Wolf Star, Dupi. I want the second star, the Big Dipper, the Great Gate Star, Merak. I want the third star, the Big Dipper, the Blessing Star, Picta. I want the fourth star, the Big Dipper, the Literate Turn Star, Megrez. I want the fifth star, the Big Dipper, the Clean and Pure Star, Elioth. I want the sixth star, the Big Dipper, the Military Turn Star, Mizar. The star navigation has begun. The 6 constellations are looking at you. The thousands of constellations disappeared and my mind became heavy like a crowded subway. I felt dizzy while blood flowed from my nose and ears. It was hard to even think. My brain became overloaded the moment I contacted 6 constellations at the same time. The Great Bear Star started talking. What are you thinking? You called all of us. Your mind will become completely destroyed. Why call us? Why don't you go the easy path instead of the authority path? However, I didn't stop. One more constellation would need to be called if I want to use the 4-yin demonic beheading sword, but there are no constellations left on the sky disk. You've exhausted the number of times that the Ganpangui can be used. I pulled out the dragon jar that I got from the Tyrant King and dissolved something in it. The 7-person dungeon, the dissolving jar. I put 2 items in the jar. I'll sacrifice the S-grade 3-ring loop and the S-grade Ganpangui to call one more constellation. The dissolved power of the dragon jar has shown its strength. The S-grade 3-ring loop has disappeared as a sacrifice. The S-grade Ganpangui has one more use. I once again used Ganpangui and called one last constellation. I want the 7th star, the Big Dipper, the Broken Army Star, Alcade. 7 stars filled the air. The 7 stars that made up the Big Dipper were all gathered. At the same time, the 7 stars spoke to me. What do you want from us? I want to cut off the signs of the constellations. Lend me your sword. Do you know what this means? I know. I did this despite being well aware of the risk. The final reward of the 4th scenario was the Absolute Throne. The throne was an item that borrowed the power of a god of the world. It would be very convenient if I got the throne. I'd be able to put restrictions on Yu Zhong, and the enemies threatening me would disappear. But Seoul would surely be eliminated. It would be a complete destruction without any salvation or miracles. It was the price to be paid for borrowing the power of the throne. In order to attain the ending that I wanted, no one could take this throne. Even the heavenly constellations are afraid of the founder of the throne. But you, a human, wants to challenge the owner of this thing? I could do it with your help. I'm not fighting against the owner. I just want to cut off the connection between the owner and this thing. It is likely that he can't afford it. He will die. It's something that I have decided, and I'll start it now. The 7 stars were silent. Some time passed. The Big Dipper shone brightly, and their signs were engraved on the sword. I shall respect your will, even if you die here. We will remember you. A dazzling light wrapped around the 4-yin demonic beheading sword and started to burn with brighter flames. The S+ grade 4-yin demonic beheading sword has evolved into the Star Relic 4-yin demonic beheading sword. The Star Relic 4-yin demonic beheading sword was originally a ceremonial sword. It was a sword to cut off evil energy and prevent disasters. I swung the sword towards the Absolute Throne. There was a loud sound and fire flared. The 4-yin demonic beheading sword was one of the few items that could break the link that a constellation had to a Star Relic. There was a sound of tearing in the air. As if it started to notice something, an ominous black light floated above the Absolute Throne. I swung it a few more times, and the 4-yin demonic beheading sword started to collapse. And I had to believe in the Big Dipper stars. Yusanga cried out, "Dokja, quickly!" I wielded the sword like a madman. I ignored the breaking blade and continued to hit the throne. Sparks flashed and the blade broke. And finally, the constellation linked to the Star Relic Absolute Throne has disappeared. The unknown god has noticed a change in this world. The Absolute Throne became an ordinary chair and lost its light. The intermediate Dokubi's angry voice was heard. You lowlifes can't grasp what you're dealing with. The sub-scenario has ended. People stopped moving. The scenario was over, so they didn't have to continue. The Big Dipper stars told me, Incarnation, prepare for the flooding of possibilities. As soon as I heard the voice, blood poured from my mouth. It felt like something was pulling at my presence. An enormous power that seemed to tear at my flesh surrounded me. I struggled to gain my mind. It was going to be okay. The possibility would become plausibility. I tried my best to make everything plausible, thus I could overcome this. I barely held on to consciousness. Then a star in the distant night shone quietly. The constellation, Maritime War God, is looking at you. There's a calm, lonely, but gentle gaze. The constellation, Bald General Justice, is looking at you. Then 2. The constellation, Last Year of Huangsangbu, is looking at you. 3. The constellation, Lady Brocade Sleep, is looking at you. The immediate Dokubi cried out when he saw the messages from the constellations. Why? Every time a star was added, my pain diminished a little bit. I realized that the constellations were sharing the probabilities I had to bear. The story that is implausible became a plausible story with the consent of many stars. Numerous stars were wrapping me in their light. The Big Dippers also lent me their strength. Is this the story that you wanted to show? I wanted to answer, but I didn't have the power. We will watch you, king of the world without kings. The chaotic soul night sky. Left of the stars that sent me light. The constellation King Hemu the Great is looking at you. The constellation One-Eyed Matre is looking at you. All the upper grade constellations of Sol were shining towards me. There were many stars. It wasn't enough to overturn the dark night sky. I looked up at the turbulent clouds that filled the great hall. The fourth scenario is forcibly ended. It was an unprecedented scenario, so it'll take time to settle the scenario. I wiped the blood pouring from my nose, and the enemy Dokja approached.
You've made the worst choice. You will regret what you did for today for the rest of your life. I'll make sure of it.
I laughed as my vision blurred. The Dokja's words meant that I won the game. You have accomplished a non-existent achievement. Your new narrative is created. The narrative, King of a World Without a King, has been born. You've obtained the possibility of stigma. I didn't have a next regression. I'd reached the end of the story in this world.